Welcome to Bold Voices, a production of the Community Foundation of Broward, where we explore Broward's biggest issues, get to know some of the people and organizations creating a bold impact in our community, and take a deeper dive into the world of local philanthropy with the experts at the Community Foundation of Broward. And now it's time to be bold.
Welcome to Bold Voices, a podcast production of the Community Foundation of Broward, leading with love to ensure that all Broward residents have equal opportunities to flourish and achieve their dreams. I'm your host, Ellen Jaffe. It is undeniable that human rights, respect, and equality are key factors in an individual's or a group's ability to live a peaceful, secure, and enriching life. We recently spoke with Broward State Attorney Harold F. Pryor, who, after seeing a steady increase in hate crimes nationally and locally, initiated the Broward Hate Crimes Task Force. And they are actively pursuing those who commit hate crimes, while at the same time working with local nonprofits and community organizations to educate people about the issue. And as the state attorney said, education is the key. So today we're going to delve into this a bit further with the Dean of Florida Atlantic University's Dorothy F. Schmidt College of Arts and Letters, where in 2014 they launched the Center for Peace, Justice, and Human Rights. Michael Horswell, it is a pleasure to have you on Bold Voices.
Well, Ellen, it's my pleasure and really an honor to be here on your podcast. I'm a big fan of the Broward Community Foundation, and so this is a real treat to be with you.
There's a lot of overlap with what they do in ensuring that people have a healthy, good life, and that includes human rights. It's so important. Can you give us an overview of what the Center for Peace, Justice, and Human Rights does, and what's the ultimate goal of your work?
Sure. So first, the center is located in the Dorothy F. Schmidt College of Arts and Letters, and so we're a college of arts, humanities, and social sciences. And so the center is a interdisciplinary approach to peace studies. It was founded many years ago, actually before 2014, we called it the Peace Studies Program. And it was founded by a philanthropist and a group of faculty who really believed in the mission of peace studies. And I know your listeners here at the Community Foundation would appreciate this because philanthropy can make such a difference. And in this case, it did. A woman named Barb Schmidt from Boca Raton saw that this was an important gap, and she helped us found that Peace Studies program. And then over the years, it grew into a whole center. And in 2014, we named it the Center for Peace, Justice, and Human Rights.
It's so critical. It always has been. If you go back in time, since the beginning of history, there have been issues with slavery, with abuses, with people not being treated equally. And I always thought, as I was growing up, that, things are getting better. And yet you look around the world, and in so many places, we see these horrible genocides happening. And I feel like right now we're in a particularly unsettled time. Based on your research at the Center for Peace, Justice, and Human Rights at FAU, am I right that there is a particularly tense time right now globally?
Well, I think that perception is right. I think we know there are a number of conflicts and wars around the world right now. And it is uncertain times for many other reasons. When you think about, for example, the migration patterns that are unsettling peoples and forcing peoples to feel like they have to move and find a new home. And that ends up creating conflict. I think there are a lot of issues of inequality across the globe that also drive some of the conflicts. So it is a time that seems very unsettled. Our approach in the center, in the curriculum, is to teach this from many perspectives. It's interdisciplinary. So we have courses that are coming from history, coming from literature, coming from political science, sociology, different disciplines. And so taking that long view that history gives you, or even other disciplines like literature and philosophy, etc., you know that this seems to be part of the human condition, unfortunately. As you pointed out, we have been living with conflict since the beginning, really. Right. And you see it in the different religious traditions that go back thousands of years and the way sacred texts are articulated, etc. So I think it's the kind of thing where we want to make sure our students learn that long history so they can better interpret their current times, the contemporary times, and the future that they're going to be working in, living in, and maybe leading. Many of our graduates go into fields and disciplines of work in which they're actually the leaders, and they're going to be the future leaders of our country and the world. So we think having at least some exposure to the history of peace, because just as much as there's a history of conflict, there is a history of peacemaking.
Right.
And we think that's important to be exposed to, and hopefully it will make a difference in the world.
What is the age range of the students who are most interested in this program?
Well, it's a wonderful thing about Florida Atlantic is we have a very diverse student body. So we have students that come from all backgrounds and come from all age groups. And so we'll have, because we have dual enrollment, we'll even have high school students who are taking college level courses in our classes. And then we have senior learners. We have one of the largest lifelong learning programs in the country as well. So we really cover the spectrum. And you'll find students in the Peace, Justice, and Human Rights program who come from all ages.
Can you see a difference in the younger people versus people who have been around a little bit longer in their perceptions? I think social media is a big factor in how people perceive what is happening in the world.
I'm glad you brought up social media. I find that social media is one of the most, frankly, toxic environments. And I worry, frankly, that everyone of all ages gets sucked into that kind of discourse. And now with artificial intelligence, it's even harder to know what is real and what is fake, right?
Yes.
And so one of our hallmarks, I think, of the program is our faculty make it a real point to work with sources that are reliable. And part of the teaching really is to work through which sources you can trust and which ones you can't.
Right.
That's a really important issue. And that can be important whether you're doing historical work and looking at historical sources or you're looking at the contemporary sources. I think that's a really major piece of this. And in that sense, hopefully tempering folks who get their information from social media, maybe introducing them to other sources that they can go to.
What would be some other sources? I know so many people who, as soon as they get home from work, the phone is out and they're just scrolling and scrolling. And then you find debates about which source on social media is more correct. And, they're coming from all the way over there and they're coming from all the way over there. So you can't trust any of them.
Right. Well, and I'm certainly not an expert on this, but I do have a bias toward legacy media, frankly. And whether it tends to the left or the right, the media that have editors, that have trained journalists, that have, experts who are going through and sourcing their stories. I was talking to a journalist just last week that we had on campus, and he works for the New York Times, and he mentioned that, he has to have 3 verifiable sources before he can write a story. 3, and they have to come from different perspectives. And so, if your source is not doing that hard work of traditional journalism, I would call it, and making sure that their story is grounded in the facts, then I think it's a problem. And so, I wouldn't necessarily advocate for any particular source. I just think it's important for listeners to always do that extra homework before they get too comfortable with the source.
Yeah. I remember the first time I found out that there were companies that had bots, basically, that took the same story and created one story that would appeal to the right viewpoint and one story that would appeal to the left viewpoint. Same company, completely opposing versions of the same story.
Wow, interesting.
So, yeah.
And I know your background is in journalism, so you can appreciate the hard work that is involved in getting the story right.
Absolutely.
And that's so important.
And
that's another piece of our center. Our center also has attached to it what we call Political Communication Center. And they're doing polling work, they're doing survey work, and then they do a very deep analysis of what's coming back from those surveys. So it's more than an opinion poll. It's really a very well-researched surveying mechanism that can get to some of these contemporary issues.
So important. And one of the things that I noticed on your website about the Center for Peace, Justice, and Human Rights is also a focus on critical thinking.
That's key. And I think that whole conversation we just had about sourcing is critical thinking. It's learning how to think critically about everything we read and how to interpret what we're reading. And we certainly are not teaching what to think, but really how to go through a process of critical inquiry.
And, when you're dealing with issues that are this big and this wide, they're national, they're global, they're local, how do you break them down so that you can really tackle it through education and research? You do community engagement. How do you separate different issues so that people can study them? It's
really hard. And I think part of it is through the curriculum. So our executive director, Dr. Nichols, has done a really good job of making sure the curriculum has a diverse group of courses. So folks are getting different perspectives and different disciplinary perspectives on peace and justice and human rights. And so in that sense, it helps kind of like in a building blocks. You're not going to get everything in the first course, but by the time you take 4 or 5 courses, which is the total of the certificate, you've built a body of knowledge that then you can go out into the world, I think, and use that knowledge in any field, really, but certainly in fields like diplomacy or international relations or even journalism. We have a lot of students that do journalism with the Peace Studies program. And so it's a great curriculum that can be attached to almost any discipline, including disciplines not in the humanities. We have students coming over from the College of Science or the College of Business and getting these courses because they know to act ethically and to think ethically in the world requires that knowledge base in history and literature and philosophy and ethics.
One of the key components of the programs is teaching teachers how to teach this subject. Can you tell us about that?
Yes, and the real hallmark in this area is our wonderful Gutterman Family Holocaust and Human Rights Education Center, which is part of our Peace, Justice, and Human Rights Center. And this is a center that was established 25 years ago to teach and to support our school teachers in the district here in Broward County, as well as in Palm Beach and Martin counties. Really support them when the mandate came from the state that we have to teach Holocaust in our high schools and middle schools. The problem was the mandate came with no real resources for teachers. So our center was established at FAU, and eventually the Gutterman family, wonderful philanthropists, came in and secured it forever because it had had a state cut, budget cut, and thankfully, Mrs. Gutterman read about it in the newspaper and said, we should do something to help, and they did. And now that center, years later, is supporting the teachers by creating a curriculum that we provide free of cost to all teachers that want to teach the Holocaust in their high schools or middle schools. We do things like we have a contest in which the teachers can win a trip to Poland and Israel to learn on insight about the Holocaust. We find that we Gutterman scholars, because this is again funded by this family, and then they come back from that experience, which is like a summer trip. They come back really motivated even more to teach in the schools. Yeah. And they can come from any discipline. So we have teachers from all the disciplines that have brought the Holocaust into their classroom. And what, it was interesting, you opened with a conversation about hate crimes. Mm-hmm. What we find in Holocaust education research is that students who have been exposed to Holocaust education in the schools are less likely to be involved in bullying and in hate kind of speech because they see the origins of hate in the case of the Holocaust and where it led to. So it's a wonderful lesson for fighting all kinds of hate that pop up today in our schools.
How do you teach the teachers to deal with students or adults who are Holocaust deniers? After all this time, no matter how many images they may see or books they may read, they've either been taught or come to believe that it didn't really happen. And I want to clarify, it's not just about Jewish people. It was gay people. It was people of color, people with disabilities. Anyone who wasn't considered a perfect white person pretty much was up for going to a concentration camp.
Yeah, exactly. And I think, first of all, teaching that history broadly, like you just did in your comment, is really important because then I think all of our students, wherever they're coming from in their own lives, can relate. If they see, I'm African American and I see that, some of the people persecuted were the other for the Germans, I can kind of understand that. It's really hard to understand 6 million people being murdered by a state. But when you bring it down to that personal level and people start making the connections based on their own lived reality, then I think it's very successful. And so I think what the Gutterman Center does is they try to provide that kind of material for teachers to use responsibly in the class. And of course, we partner with wonderful institutions like the Washington Memorial Holocaust Museum and their materials, the Yad Vashem over in Israel. We have a lot of different folks who support this effort. And we figure that by training the teachers, we have a huge impact because every teacher is touching at least, 100 and 150 students per year. So it really is exponential, the results of this effort.
It's wonderful. We're going to be speaking with, in the next few months, the CEO at the Holocaust Documentation and Education Center in Hollywood. They do interviews with the few remaining survivors because so many of them are so old that there's only a certain amount of time left to capture their stories.
Right. And I should have said that the research shows that students who are exposed to a survivor, who hear a survivor's testimony, are 10 times more likely to really internalize the message, understand it, and carry it forward.
Yeah.
And that getting back to your original question, all these strategies is what fights the deniers. And so when a student has had a lesson with a real live survivor, a human being there in their classroom, and then they hear on the playground, oh, that never happened. Well, no, they know it happened because they just met someone, or they worked with materials that used survivor testimony as the heart of the lesson.
It comes to mind as we're talking about teaching the Holocaust, there are movements to remove the teaching of slavery in America. How do we equate those two things as one is worthy of education and one is not?
Fortunately, our Department of History, for example, has made no changes to our curriculum when it comes to the teaching of slavery. We think it's obviously another episode of human history that must be taught, should be taught, and it should be taught from perspectives that our scholars have developed through their research. So we certainly still teach it, and as far as I'm concerned, continue to teach it.
How do these topics and programs, how are they received by the community and the students? You've already said that it changes their outlook. Is it difficult for some of them to see what has happened throughout time?
Certainly. And, I think, being generous on the side of folks saying that maybe we shouldn't be teaching slavery or the Holocaust or what have you, I understand maybe they're trying to protect the sensibilities of children or something, but I think it's the opposite. First of all, I think children are very resilient and they can absorb in the grade appropriate way these really tough lessons. In Holocaust education, again, we start in the middle schools. We don't wait till the high school. Right. And it's very effective, the work that we're doing there. And the same thing, I think our American history should be started certainly in the middle schools. And even the tough conversations, the things that are really unfortunate about our history, we have to teach them, in my opinion, because in that way, hopefully we don't repeat that history. But also it brings us to a better understanding of our contemporary moment, I think, when we understand the history of all Americans, if you will, and where we all came from or started out here on the continent in the case of our Native Americans.
This is an interesting place where philanthropy is really important because, as you said, the Gutterman program is through philanthropy. If they had not stepped up and made an endowment, the program wouldn't exist, the same as we have programs here at the Community Foundation of Broward that could not exist without philanthropy. And Broward is such a generous county.
It sure is. And if I may, the story is even more beautiful in some ways. When the Guttermans did that, they inspired another family in Palm Beach named Kurt and Marilyn Wallach. And Kurt was a survivor of the Holocaust. His father was a survivor that got him and his siblings out of originally Ukraine and then to the Netherlands. And then, of course, they had to leave the Netherlands as well. But when Kurt settled in Florida, towards the end of his life, he started teaching about the Holocaust and wrote umpteen books. I think he wrote 5 or 6 different books on the Holocaust. In his 80s and 90s, he was writing these books. But he heard about the Gutterman Center, started coming to our programs, started speaking for us. And at the end of his life, he said, I want to leave a legacy too. And he and his wife, Marilyn, gave the lead gift for a brand new building on our campus, which will be called the Kurt and Marilyn Wallach Jewish and Holocaust Studies Building. And it's where everything we've been talking about will be housed. The Peace Studies program, the Diplomacy program, the Gutterman Center, and then something I want to talk about too is our amazing Holocaust Museum that will be built there. So, it's philanthropists inspiring other philanthropists. And when all this discussion of the building started and we started designing the building, another couple who actually was from Broward, Craig and Barbara Wiener, who had created a museum at Nova University some years ago, a Holocaust museum, they got excited and wanted to build another one for Florida Atlantic. And so, long story short, we started working together. And so part of the Wallach building will be a dedicated museum with authentic artifacts that tell the story. And it's going to be remarkable. And again, another asset for teaching students of all ages, be a real centerpiece for the community to come to visit anytime. It'll be open all the time for visits, and it's a really first-class museum. We're using one of the best museum designers in the country to make it an amazing experience for the viewer. And so again, these 3 families are making such a huge impact on the whole community and certainly on future generations of students.
Do you have a timeline of when you think the museum may be opening?
Yes, I'm pretty confident. I can say the building's under construction, and it should be opening this time next year. We're hoping spring 2027 and hopefully March of 2027.
Okay, I'll look forward to that. And I do want to mention, if you are interested in reading the books that Kurt Wallach wrote, the spelling is Wallach, Probably be able to find them at your library.
I hope so. If not, we will get them out to the libraries. We do have a big collection of copies that we would be happy to provide to a library if they'd like them.
How could someone contact the university about that?
Probably the best thing to do would be to contact the Gutterman Center. There's a website, and you can find the contact information there, and just call and just say, I heard that you might have some books that you can give to the library, and we'd be happy to get them. That's one of the purposes also of the Gutterman Center, is to supply materials for the teaching of the Holocaust.
Okay. And as long as we're giving people references to go and look at FAU, look at the website, where can they see information about the Center for Peace, Justice, and Human Rights?
So I think if you just type into your search engine, Peace, Justice, Human Rights, Florida Atlantic University, it'll pop up. It'll probably be the first thing that pops up. And then you have a very nice website. One thing we do every year for the community is we celebrate the anniversary of the Declaration of Human Rights, which is always in December. And this is a program that started a couple of years ago, and now we build a whole day around it with seminars and talks by experts on that important moment in human history when, right after World War II, this declaration was signed by many, many countries. And it's basically a pledge to do better, to do better by humanity. And so it's a wonderful celebration that was something that our director, Dr. Nichols, is carrying forward every year.
One of the things that I'm intrigued by is the diplomacy program. You mentioned it briefly earlier. In addition to just learning about Holocaust studies and human rights, diplomacy is such an important aspect of creating human rights and peace between nations. What is involved in the diplomacy program?
I'm very proud of this program, and this was a program that was started many years ago also. And the force behind it is one of our professors in the Department of Political Science, Dr. Jeffrey Morton. Some of your viewers that go to Osher Lifelong Learning will know Dr. Morton because he also lectures there. He's very popular, so he has a lot of followers because he lectures on foreign policy every year, and all his lectures are very topical, in the moment, what's going on in the world. And also Dr. Morton was part of the original group founding the Peace Studies program. Anyway, so the diplomacy program really trains our students to be good diplomats, whether they're going to go professionally into the world of foreign service and diplomacy, or, as you pointed out early, these skills of negotiation and listening to others and understanding and then making your argument and hopefully winning your argument. All those skills are good for anybody in any field, right? So the diplomacy program trains folks for that, and then it uses the model United Nations competition as a vehicle to take the students up to New York City and compete nationally. I'm very proud of the fact that our diplomacy program has won the national title several years in a row, many years, I think 5 or 6 years, I've lost count. But it's an amazing experience. It's named after Leon Charney because his wife, his widow, when he passed, gave us, again, another example of philanthropy, created an endowment to make sure that our students could do this experience debt-free. So they basically pays them their trip to New York or Washington to compete and also take the course that's related to diplomacy. Leon Charney, their listeners may remember him. He was the back channel negotiator for the Camp David Accords, working with Jimmy Carter, President Carter, and those folks back then. And, always had a great love for diplomacy and world politics. And so he, when he passed, his widow honored him with that gift.
What would you say, having spent this time with the Center for Peace, Justice, and Human Rights, are some of the characteristics or traits or techniques that people can learn and use? If you could pick, say, 3 or 4 off the top of your head, that someone who can do this, and this will likely be good at working with others and being diplomatic and maybe having an impact on the world.
That's a big question. I think probably if I had to name 2 or 3, I'd say, first of all, is being a good listener. I think listening carefully to someone that's not like you and really trying to get to an understanding of what motivates that person is key in any negotiation. And then in my idealistic way, I hope that that person, once learning and maybe having empathy for that other position, then works to try to find, common ground. So the ability to listen and then to find common ground, I think, is what will save the world. Frankly, I don't want to sound too Pollyannish, but I think I feel like we're not doing enough of that sometimes.
Right.
And so I think those are characteristics that are important. And then I think knowledge is important. So having some historical knowledge, exposure to the other, as I say, through literature, film studies, anything that represents people that are different than ourselves. And that's a beautiful thing that literature does, really. When you read a novel, you really get into that space of someone else, someplace else, some other time period. It could be through many of the different humanities disciplines, but really developing that knowledge base through those kinds of studies, I think, is helpful, because before you know it, those kinds of pieces of knowledge will come in handy, I think, in negotiations or in, just going through life and working with others.
Yeah, I try to remember always to think about walking in someone else's shoes, and that you don't know what it's like until you've been there. But if you listen, as you say, and you try to find your commonalities, because I believe we all have some things in common.
Sure do.
Everybody gets hungry and wants to eat. And if that's the basis of what can make something work, okay, great. It's something you have in common. And I think if people can remember when they're having a conversation with someone who may be different from them, what are their shoes like? What have they walked through? What has their life been like that brought them to this place? What would I be like if I had grown up in a different country at a different time?
And, I think, like Ellen, I totally agree. And I think, knowing that things like art, didn't talk about that, but we have a huge art program as well. Looking at art through a historian's eyes or through an art critic's eyes, you see things that maybe you've never experienced before. And it can challenge you, but I think it's a good thing to be challenged by art, whatever form of art.
Yes, music is another music,
that's for sure.
I mean, if there's a universal, and the smile.
That helps.
When you see someone smiling, it changes everything.
That's right. And you mentioned music. I failed to mention that in the Wallach building for Jewish Holocaust Studies, Mrs. Wallach was adamant that we have a space for music, and we needed a good recital hall for our School of Music. So it was perfect synergy there. So the building will have this wonderful, very acoustically sophisticated recital hall, which will also be a lecture hall. We expect many music programs in the space of peace and justice.
How can people get involved? Do they have to be a student? Can they just come to a lecture and audit it? What are the different ways that people can participate and support?
Well, thank you for asking. There are many ways. First, we certainly have 4 credit classes for students who are getting a degree at Florida Atlantic. But we also have a mechanism we call a certificate in peace, justice, and human rights, which you don't have to be pursuing a degree at all. You can be what we call a non-degree seeking student, and you just take the 4 or 5 courses in the certificate, and you can do that over time. There's no rush, and it's take 1 course a semester, and it's a great way for working people, for example, to take their certificate. Some of those courses are online, 100% online, so you don't even have to drive to campus. The other way is, as you mentioned, attending lectures. All of our public programs in the College of Arts and Letters are open to the public, whether it's music, theater, dance, and the public lectures, they're all open. Most of them are free. Some of them have very minimal cost, and we keep the cost low on purpose to make sure access is available for all people in our communities. And then the other way to get involved would be to volunteer. We have a lot of volunteers that come help and get involved in the operations of these different centers, especially when we have a big event happening or something like that. And then, of course, we've been talking a lot about philanthropy. The philanthropy really helps. And, we have multiple ways for philanthropy to help with, from just a one-time gift to, different kinds of structures for help. And, of course, the Community Foundation is one of our partners in all sorts of philanthropies, as they are for many institutions in our community.
I would like to say that if the spirit moves you, you can find out about starting your very own philanthropic fund in an area that matters to you, and maybe it is peace, justice, and human rights. You can visit cfbroward.org, and if you're interested in seeing what you might be investing in, the website is fau.edu/arts and letters. So I just want to thank you again, Michael Horswell, Dean of FAU's Dorothy F. Schmidt College of Arts and Letters, the home of the Center for Peace, Justice, and Human Rights. And thank you for listening to Bold Voices, a production of the Community Foundation of Broward. I'm Ellen Jaffe. I hope that you will join us regularly on our YouTube page to hear more about the people and organizations making positive and important change in Broward County and really throughout the world, and always leading with love. Michael, it has been a pleasure. I wish we had another hour.
Me too. It's been great, Ellen. Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you for listening to Bold Voices. We hope you've enjoyed this episode and hope you'll be inspired to join us in creating a better Broward for all. If you'd like more information, visit us online at cfbroward.org, and remember to always be bold.